Thank you for tuning in, and I am delighted to have Kirby Sommers come back after her viral appearance 2 to 3 weeks ago. And what an encyclopedia of knowledge Kirby has installed in her grey matter over the years researching these people, because the viewers were just blown away. I am still getting positive comments coming in,
Wow.
just praising, the scope of what you ranged over. And if you are watching on YouTube, we've got Kirby's website, Twitter, Patreon, YouTube, Substack. All links are in the description box, and I'll also put the YouTube link into the live chat right now. And Kirby's gonna go over some things. If you've got a question and put it in the chat, I will save them for later. But by all means, put questions in. If we're not acknowledging your questions at the time, it just means I'm saving it for later. But you
So,
are
Shaun, I
welcome
want to
yeah.
thank you for having me back. It was really a lot of fun for me to talk with you again after a couple of years. We didn't talk for maybe 2 years or so. And that did go well. I mean, I too am getting messages that, oh, it was great. We want to hear more. So today we are going to discuss Hugh Hefner's connection step by step to Jimmy Savile. However, what I want to say at the outset is that although Hefner had a well-known friendship with Bill Cosby, who is alleged to have abused countless women and, let's say, younger females, and who, by the way, had an apartment just across the street from Jeff on East 71st Street in New York, I'm not going to discuss Cosby here. I want to bring you other information and not simply rehash things that have been disclosed before. But I do want to remind everyone that Hefner's mansions were equipped with audiovisual surveillance, just like the one our friend Leslie Wexner provided to Jeff. It really in both the Florida Palm Beach mansion and in the one in New York City. So that said, are people okay that I'm not going to discuss Cosby?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
It's your prerogative to discuss whatever you like.
All right. So some names will be familiar. So, for example, Robert Maxwell is a name that will be familiar with everyone. There are SATANIC threads that link through these people, and that should be familiar to everyone. So Hefner, just his basic information, he was born on April 9th, 1926. He ended his life on September 27, 2017. Now, at the time, he had an E. coli infection, and he was given antibiotics, and he was in good health. Although he was 91, he was in good health. He was okay. He was sick for 6 days and he died. Now, at the time that he died in 2017, it was believed, and that stuff is no longer available, but it was believed that he had been unalived by a group of powerful PDF files in Hollywood, and that he was coming under investigation again for allegations that had been made by a girl who had been 5 at the time, that she alleged in a lawsuit that he had done something to her. So we will be talking about that lawsuit as we move through this. However, if you look at information today about his death, the information says natural causes. But there's really interesting stuff about Hefner that I think people should know. He is a Mayflower descendant by way of his father, Glenn Lucius Hefner, and he's related to the very first governor of Plymouth, William Bradford. And this man served as the governor 30 times. Each term, however, during those days was 1 year. But 30 years being the governor of Plymouth, I thought that was outstanding. However, there are other very interesting ancestors of Bradford, and therefore there also related to our friend Hefner. And these include the Baldwin brothers, Alec, Daniel, William, who we know as Billy, and Stephen Baldwin. And of course, who does Stephen tell us? He has a daughter whose name is Haley, who is married to Justin Bieber. And by the way, Bieber was a regular at Hefner's mansion. The first time he went, he was accompanied by his father. However, even when he was dating Selena Gomez, who was 18 when he was 16, he would go to the mansion. He had an open invitation to be with Hef, whether or not there was a party, and he would go. Now, this is clearly not a good place for a young teenage boy to be, because Hef was fond of unusual activities, and I'm going to try to like tiptoe around this with, let's say, things that would normally be our pets. I know. I see that look of. You didn't know that? Yeah, these guys are into that, and they force the people to do that. And I am sure that this too is part of the Combs case. Yeah, it's okay. So other people, and I'm going to keep talking about his relatives because they're interesting. Other people who frequented the mansion at the time that Bieber was like partying there when he was a little boy, Leonardo DiCaprio. He was another regular, and he is said to have hooked up with Rihanna at the mansion in front of everyone. Okay, I'm going to move on. Eminem. Oh, doesn't he remind us of our last conversation, who was, of course, with Interscope? Now, another person, an interesting woman, Julia Child, who worked for the OSS. You know that she worked for the OSS, right? Julia Child, you didn't know that? Oh, you are so funny today. Okay, well,
we're here to learn.
Okay, well, I'm here to help you learn. So, like, Julia Child was born to a well-to-do family. She was very tall. She was 6'2". She was too tall for the Army, and she was too tall for the Navy. So she's like, okay, well, I'll go to the OSS. And she didn't know how to cook. I mean, her family was wealthy. They had cooks. She had no reason to have learned to cook. However, even though she began as a low-level, let's say, typist in Washington, D.C., she became a top-level researcher for William Donovan, the head of the OSS, which we know is the precursor to the CIA. And so her first recipe was actually a shark repellent, because the agency was concerned that sharks were accidentally setting off explosives and attacking their pilots that were in the water. So Child set about creating her very first recipe, the shark repellent, which saved a lot of the lives of the pilots that would land. So anyway, the other thing that I thought was interesting is that although she met her husband in the OSS and they were married and appeared to be very happily married, there were allegations, even on his Wikipedia page, that he was in fact attracted to the same, let's say, other men, and that so Julia may just be one of our beard wives. And we're going to meet another beard wife that was connected to our friend Jeff as we move along. Now, other people who are related to Hefner by way of this ancestor who came over on the Mayflower: George Eastman, the founder of Eastman Kodak Company; Clint Eastwood; Sally Field; Christopher Reeve, who played Superman in the movies; John Lithgow, the actor; and Benjamin Spock, who wrote books on childcare. Any of these surprise you? Or, I mean, there's more. This is a short list. But if I read the whole thing, it just would take too long. What do you think about these people?
Everybody's absolutely fascinated in the chat right now by this.
Oh, that's good to hear. So it doesn't end there, because prior to the 2004 U.S. election, it was revealed that he was a distant relative of the two top-level presidential candidates, which at the time were George W. Bush and Senator John Kerry. Now, there are photos people can pull up still today of Carey, who is also a member of the Forbes family. So his full name is John Forbes Carey, at Jeff's house with, and I'm going to use the term Filipino housekeepers only because I want to say something about the Philippines. And with the housekeepers Jojo and Junlin Fontanilla. Now, of interest, Junlin died of mysterious causes in 2016. And one of Jeff's victims, Jennifer Arroz, named Fontanilla as one of her recruiters, which I thought was interesting. I could see her being named as an accomplice, a co-conspirator, but I didn't think that his housekeepers would recruit. Now, I read the article 3 times. I'm familiar with the Arroz name, but she passed away in 2016. Other people photographed with this couple who were with him for 20 years include clearly Bill Clinton, Hilary Swank, Chris Tucker, who is also connected to our friend, right, Diddy, Prince Andrew, as well as his ex-wife, Sarah. And so just a quick thing about John Forbes Carey. Under Obama, he served as the 68th United States Secretary of State. Now, regarding the Philippines, and the only reason I explained that they too were from the Philippines, is that Adnan Khashoggi, Robert Maxwell, Leslie Wexner, even Rafi Eitan, the Mossad spy, had help from the Philippines. And there's a reason for that. It is because the CIA, from its inception, has as its main headquarters for Southeast Asia, it's in the Philippines, and it remained an important asset to the agency, okay? Now, if we look at the Bush and Kerry connections, it takes us to Yale, right? As well as the infamous Skull and Bones Secret Society, and of course, to CIA. In the Bush line, we even have a connection back to the person we spoke about in part 1, who co-founded CBS, right? So, which is William Paley, who also gave Clive Davis his start, because Senator Prescott Bush, the father of H.W. and grandfather of W, was an early board member of CBS. So the Bush family here is a very important part of this a group. I'm going to call them a group versus a cabal. I'm going to call them a group. I'm going to be nice today. However, Hefner is also part of a very notable bloodline. So not the most important bloodline like the Rothschilds, but important nevertheless, which will explain why, despite the fact that there were many unalivements, many ODs, many things that were not above board, he never went to jail. However, before we delve further into Hef's life, I think we can call him Hef, right? It's important to note that his daughter, Christy Ann Hefner, born November 8th, 1952, attended Interlochen during the summers from 1964 to 1969. Does Interlochen sound familiar to you, Shaun?
No.
Well, our friend Jeff attended Interlochen summer camp in 1967 when he was 14. And because he was born on January 20th, 1953, he's only like 2.5 months, let's say, different from Christy, Hefner's daughter, who took over the Playboy empire. So they knew each other and they were there at the same time. It's very, I mean, they had to have known each other because I've seen photos of, let's say, Ghislaine. It's just this group. Jeff also had a cabin there, and we have heard that he and Ghislaine Maxwell procured a then 13 or 14-year-old girl at Interlochen summer camp from his cabin. And this girl that they procured when she was 13 or 14, eventually, when Ghislaine had her trial, I think it was November of 2022, She was one of the 4 witnesses who testified against her. Now, the other thing that I find it Interlochen of really enormous interest, and I suggest to those of you who are listening, who are researchers, that you dig into Interlochen, because their connections to intelligence and to people in the intelligence, let's say, apparatus, are kind of astounding. Anthony Rapp, who is one of Kevin Spacey's accusers, also attended Interlochen. And not least of all, I want to discuss Mike Wallace. Now, he may be familiar to some of the older people in the audience, but some of the younger people may not know who Mike Wallace is. He was a journalist, a media personality, and one of the original correspondents on the CBS News program 60 Minutes. So after the last year of his university studies at the University of Michigan, which is, by the way, part of Interlochen summer camp, it's the same school, he spent his first summer working on air as the radio guy at Interlochen, and he has been, he's not only in Epstein's Black Book. Epstein gave parties for him and introduced the 13 or 14-year-old to him and to Donald Trump. Now, there is a very well-known photograph that has been making the rounds ever since Jeff was arrested, and it shows from left to right. Now, you guys can pull it up as I'm talking because I haven't learned how to add things to this platform. I'm still teaching myself. But from left to right is Steve Ross, Donald Trump, I think it's John Tower, Mike Wallace, and Robert Maxwell. Behind them, to the right, we see a large portrait of Ghislaine Maxwell wearing a creamy sweater and jeans. Now, what people may not realize is the person on the far left, Steve Ross, is actually the founder of MTV and Nickelodeon. Now, Maxwell had a 50% stake in MTV, which he sold just months before he too drowned at sea in 1991. He sold his stake, which was it was like an MTV for Europe, for the amount of 60 million to 65 on August of 91, and by November he was no longer alive. However, he sold it to Viacom, and Viacom is an important company for you guys to study, because Viacom was founded by Sumner Redstone. Yes, it is all connected, Jennifer. It is all connected. And I'm taking you step by step to Jimmy Savile. And I'm showing you how my belief that this is all part of the same thing, and it has been ongoing for generations. And the more we learn about this, the less power it can have. Okay? So it was founded, Viacom, by Sumner Redstone, who partnered with William Paley's CBS. William Paley is, remember, that guy who co-founded CIA, who created Clive Davis. And Viacom is also the parent company of Paramount Pictures. Now, the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Everyone has heard about, I think. Shaun, tell me you've heard about this.
The Process Church of the Final Judgment? No.
What's happening to my friend in the UK?
You've gone beyond, Kirby.
I tell you, I've had to piece this together because it's just bothered me for so many years. Anyway, the Process Church of the Final Judgment is connected to Charles Manson, is connected to Son of Sam, so David Berkowitz. It is connected to Jimmy Savile, who interviewed him. And Robert Evans was named the president, the head of Paramount Pictures. Now, we know Robert Evans, he did Rosemary's Baby, which of course is a Roman Polanski film, and Roman Polanski, people, plays a very significant role in connecting Hefner to Jimmy Savile. He's also responsible, Robert Evans, for the movie Love Story. He married the star Ali MacGraw, and in fact, in one of the early articles that Wexner had commissioned for himself, because he was very private and the only way people had access to him to write an article is when it was commissioned by his PR agency, which frankly was connected to Intel. But during one of those articles, he could not praise Ali MacGraw enough, which I thought was unusual because, well, doesn't he prefer, and why is he talking about Ali MacGraw? And of course, when I found the Robert Evans connection and the Roman Polanski connection and the connection to Jeff and the connection to all of these people, I thought, okay, I get it, because Robert Evans did marry Ali MacGraw. She was one of his many wives. Later, he married someone else who was connected to the Nexium thing, but that would be too much to get into. So we're just going to keep going. He made Chinatown. Jack Nicholson, also, who, one of the tunnels that we will talk about soon, is right there with Hefner, was in Chinatown, which is basically taken from the life of Rachel Chandler, who we spoke about in part 1. And so let's talk about these tunnels briefly. And then I'm going to go back to some more information about Robert Evans. So the tunnels were built by Bernie Kornfeld. They connected to the houses of James Caan, who was in The Godfather, again, made by Robert Evans, Warren Beatty, Jack Nicholson, and Kirk Douglas, who was alleged to have R-worded a teenage Natalie Wood. Now, Robert Evans was convicted of the White movement in 1980. And he was also a person of interest in the unaliving of Roy Radin, who is connected directly to David Berkowitz, son of Sam, to the Process Church, to everything that is unholy. I'm going to use the word unholy, people, for the word S-A, T-A, blah, blah. I'm going to use unholy. So again, as we move forward, we're going to bump into another connection of Polanski's, who made very odd private films, because in the Son of Sam case, it was discovered that one of the victims, Stacy Moskowitz, was in fact filmed when she was being unalived by supposedly David Berkowitz, but actually he was nowhere near her. And the film was really for Roy Radin, who was into SNUFF films. And just a reminder that there are these people in this group that film these things, and they get a thrill from this kind of thing. And Polanski, later we will learn that he has a very close connection to this type of behavior. Of course, it is suspected that Hef also had this perverse interest in this. Now, Bernie Kornfeld, although he deserves many, a lot of time, I'm just going to briefly go over the stuff because he's important to Hefner. He also had his own mansion. It was called Gray Hall. It was connected to Pickfair, which originally was owned by Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. It was later purchased by my abuser's father, Meshulam Riklis, and his much younger wife, Pia Zadora. There was a tunnel, so that the tunnel system is acknowledged in older houses. So Kornfeld moved into this mansion after a lot of stuff that happened in the UK and in Switzerland and in other places. Now, the tunnels were acknowledged by Playboy on Twitter in 2015. However, they scrubbed that tweet. I took a screen image of it. It's on my Substack. One person who worked at the mansion disclosed that he found a couple of unused and closed off rooms in the tunnel area under the house. And according to him, one of them had a lot of paintings that he had never seen anywhere of Marilyn Monroe, who we know was how Hefner began his magazine with unpaid photos of a young Marilyn who posed for them for $50 when she had no money as Norma Jean, and he sold 50,000 copies. And that, I guess, is his story of how he started the Playboy empire. However, Kornfeld's right-hand girl was a woman by the name of Diane Simone Michelle Halfin, who would later become Diane von Furstenberg. Now that name surely has to ring a bell, Shaun.
Kirby.
Oh, no. No.
These are going to turn into rhetorical questions at some point.
Okay, well, what I want to say before I share information on Diane von Furstenberg, who, by the way, one of the people that likes to wear her clothing and who is like a spokesperson is Jennifer Lopez, is that Jeff wanted to marry up the women that he just thought were deemed worthy of marrying up. And he liked to marry up people into royalty. I believe that Kornfeld did the same thing. And Diane, who became Diane von Furstenberg, who was his assistant, married two gay men. The first one was Prince Egon von Furstenberg, whom she married on the same day as the Apollo 11 launch, which these people seem to use as a code amongst themselves, because MTV, if you guys look for the logo of MTV when they began, you're going to see the Apollo 11 thing, the whole thing. However, Egon was gay, and she married him, had two children with him, Alex and Tatiana, who, by the way, happened to be in Jeff's Black Book. And then she married another guy by the name of Barry Diller, who owns Interactive Corp, The Daily Beast, Fox News, many other household names, but also is gay. So that's our second beard, and I'm not going to talk about many other beards in this conversation. There are women, frankly, who are placed into, let's say, political positions, into the banking industry, into the Hollywood film industry, into the, let's say, the entertainment industry in general, that are not disposed of, that are considered smart enough and who can then relay back information to this group of people that we continue to study. Another woman that I think everyone will know who was connected to Kornfeld was Heidi Fleiss, known as the DC Madam. So Hefner also used her services in the same way that Shaun Diddy Combs is alleged to have used the service of adult entertainers. So like everyone in Hollywood knew who Heidi was, right? So Jack Nicholson used to have a restaurant called the Monkey Bar. And she was always at the Monkey Bar and everybody knew who she was. And then she used to club with Billy Idol, Peter Sellers' daughter, Victoria. And she used to also hang out with Robert Evans. Again, Robert Evans is a very dark man. And she threw a party for Mick Jagger. Who doesn't know Mick Jagger? However, she was arrested for an adult entertainment ring. In 1999, James Caan, who was one of the people who, let's say, had girls sent to him by Heidi and who also had one of the houses next to Hefner, he said of these women, well, I never paid for them. I just gave them all the white they wanted. So like, what a gentleman this James Caan is, isn't he? So anyway, we will remember that Jack Nicholson's house is where then 43-year-old Roman Polanski R-worded 13-year-old Samantha Gailey. However, in 2017, an artist in California by the name of Marianne Barnard stepped forward and said that he had R-worded her when she was just 10. Now, these ages now are becoming younger and younger and younger. And so there's a reason, and so they're like, Hefner begins his life in Chicago, where he has a mansion. He buys the mansion in California later. Now, the reason that he moves is because his secretary